If he Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our hurricane preparation event. Thank you all for joining us today. For those of you who I don't know, I'm Kristen Lariah, and I'm one of your clubhouse managers. Reagan Samaniego is the other clubhouse manager. So our speaker, James Wieland, he is coming down from the station in West Palm Beach, and he is running about 5 minutes late. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this opportunity just to go over a few of the most frequently asked questions by members during hurricane season. And we welcome you to ask your questions of us specific to club operations, club activities during the hurricane. So I just wanted to make sure. So for communication resources, how do you know if the club is closing? How do we know what's going on with the storm approaching? Emails. We'll send you notifications on the app. Now, everyone should have gotten a notification on the app for the event today. So if by chance you didn't get this notification, then your notifications are turned off on the app. So just stop by the concierge desk or come see me or someone else in the membership team, and we can help you turn them back on. If you want to turn them off, generally, that's okay, but I highly recommend you turn them on before a hurricane because it's the quickest and most efficient way for us to reach the members very quickly. As we get into hurricane season, if we do have anything come our way, we will send you a link to a page on our website and a page on our app where we'll update it and you'll see the last update. So if the club's closing as of 6 o'clock today, then the storm makes a turn and stays away, which, knock on wood, is the best thing that could happen. As soon as we've assessed that we're safe and we're ready to reopen, we'll put the notice there, and then we'll also send you an email, a notification on the app, and a phone call as well. There will be signage at the portico share, so if by chance your phone battery dies, there's no power, something like that, if it is safe and you want to see what's going on, we will communicate via a sign at the portico share as soon as it's safe for us to get here. Now, another question we get is if your family or maybe you have friends who don't live in Glen Eagles, they want to know what's going on here if a storm is approaching. In your hurricane handbook on page 14, there is a short link here, and you can fill out information for a family member or a friend to receive hurricane updates only. So it's a great way if your kids are up north and they're worried about you, say, you know what, the club will send you communications as soon as we're able to, so that way you can know what's going on and know that everything's safe here. Do I have any questions about communications? Can answer? No? Okay. All right. The other thing I wanted to mention, and this is on page 17 of your hurricane handbook, and if you did not pick up a hurricane handbook, does anyone not have one? Okay. We're going to go bring you a couple for those of you who don't have one. It's available on your app as well. I recommend you keep this handy because it's very specific to the club. Page 17, we have what's called our Healthy Lifestyle Center Comfort Services. So oftentimes members will ask if there's any place at the club that's a shelter. And raise your hand if you think the answer is yes. Oh, I see a couple. Okay. So the answer is no. The club is not a shelter. There's a lot of really strict licensing requirements with safety, accessibility. We are not a shelter. So, what we do have is this building, specifically the Healthy Lifestyle Center, is powered by a generator. So, if by chance there is an extended power outage at the club, the plan is that once cleanup has been completed and it's safe to drive through Glen Eagles, it's safe to get out of your condos, and the staff have had the opportunity to tidy up at their house and they're able to safely get here. The goal is to open this building for comfort services only. So, comfort, seating, air conditioning, cold water, and we have tons of outlets around the room for you to charge your cell phone so that way you can call your family. So that is the goal. We have not yet, fortunately, we have not had an extended loss of power since this building was built. So we haven't had to use that service. But that was the intention when they did add that standby generator. Yes. It works the entire Healthy Lifestyle Center. So from here over, yes. We've talked about that. Again, if there's cable, internet, who knows? But we'd probably try to run movies or something or TV to keep you all informed. Good idea. Anything else? Yes. So I've been here 16 years. Reagan's been here a little bit longer. There's been some extended power outages in here. It hasn't been in several years. There hasn't been anything that's come close in several years. But there have been. And what I will tell you is there's different grids in Glen Eagles, which is good because last time I think it was Strathard, I think that was down longer than anyone else. And it was the only section that was down. Well, everyone has friends. So they called up their friends in Loch Marie and Victory and Cluny, who 2 days before them had power. So that's the good news about it too. Yes, Mrs. Schneider. So in the book here, there are 3 emergency phones for security, which we have been relying upon more often than not lately. Whenever the security main phones are down, call those emergency phones. So I suggest you program those emergency phones in your phone book. And their goal is during the hurricane, all 3 of them will be up and running, and that will be how you reach security. Anything else? All right. Well, it looks like our speaker is here. So thank you very much for your patience. I'm truly excited to welcome James Wayland here from Channel 5, WPTV. And he has lots of great information for you. So I hope you enjoy the presentation. Thank you.
All right, what's up, everybody? I see you got your own little booklet here, which is super nice. It's always good to be prepared. That's what we always tell everybody, to be pre-prepared. Let me just load my little thing on here so you guys can see it. How's everybody doing today? Good? Ready for one? Good. I'd like to hear that, though. Prepared for one. That's what you meant, right? Oh, that's awesome. Oh, what happened? Yeah. right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. I'm going to take this off here because I like to walk around if I can. Hold on. But you guys can hear me even with, the streaming though. Okay. All right. So, first things first, a little introduction to myself. My name is James Whelan. I've been with Channel 5 for 17 years now. I can't believe it, actually. It's been 17 years. I got my meteorology degree from Florida State. I grew up down here in South Florida. My mom actually lives just up the street on Jog and Atlantic, actually. She still lives over there. But I grew up in Northern Broward and went to school at Coconut Creek High School. And then from there, actually, I went to community college first. I went to Broward Community College, which is called something else now. I think just Broward College. And then went up to Florida State after that. And the big thing is, in my senior year of high school, I started surfing. I had a friend that brought me to the beach. He's like, "Oh, you got to try this." I loved the Beach Boys at the time. I'm not that old. I just liked oldies music. So I liked it. And I'm like, yeah, I want to try the surfing thing. And then the instant I went out there, I was hooked. The clear blue water, the sunshine, the warm air, it was all so beautiful and so healing that I'm just like, I got to do this now. So my whole senior year was just pretty much surfing and trying to figure out what I want to do for a living, right? And while I kept thinking, well, how can I figure out when there's going to be waves again? Because right now that's all I care about. And once you know it, the weather is what makes waves. So I started looking at the weather patterns and started studying what's going to make waves. And I'm like, well, how can I turn this into a career? And there was an article in the Sun Sentinel back then that said something about, meteorologists needed, and it was TV meteorologist Don No was in it. I don't know if you guys have been here long enough to remember Don No down at Channel 10 in Miami. So he was in the article too, and some of the other local ones. And then my little sister, she's a lot younger than me, but her class, I think she was in like the 5th grade or something. And she had Don No come visit her school, like I'm doing now, but come visit a school. And I got to talk to him. I'm like, you know what? That might be a cool career. Rather than sitting behind a computer and doing research. That's the other side of meteorology too, right? Is figuring out the weather and doing all that kind of stuff. And I thought, well, I don't know if I just want to sit behind a desk at a computer all the time. I want to do something fun. So I decided to get into TV. It was a little tough to get into at first, but eventually I did. And I started out in West Virginia. It was my first job. And then that was brief. And I went down to Macon, Georgia. That was fun. And then I went to Florence and Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. In TV, you have to jump around in order to move up the ladder. Most people, we move every couple of years, right? That's why you see a lot of transient people too on the news. If this isn't their end goal, then they're just going to spend 2-3 years and then they're going to move on to get to whatever their goal is. My goal was to come right back down here. My mom is still here. My brother, my sister, everybody's here. My dad lives outside of Chicago, but he winters down here so we can go play golf and everything. So my goal was always to come back down here. I was very fortunate when WPTV had an opening. Actually, my buddy called me from college and he was the fill-in guy, Chris Zellman. And he said, you know what? I'm getting a job in Georgia. If you want this fill-in job, why don't you give him a call? So that's what I did. I called Steve Weagle. He was here. And I said, Steve, I'm going to be down here. And I'm moving down anyways because I got laid off in Baltimore. I'm moving down here anyways. You can use me if you want. This was my sales pitch for getting a job. Use me if you want. If not, fine too. But I'm here if you need me. And that was it. A week later, they called. They're like, oh my gosh, we really need somebody right now. I'm like, all right, I can come in. I was on vacation actually. But I'm like, all right, I'll stay down here for a few weeks longer to help you guys out, but then I got to go back. Do I have a job? And they're like, yeah, you have a job. I'm like, okay, I'll pack up my stuff and move down here. So that's what I did. So 17 years later, here we are. So surfing here is what this is on Palm Beach, the north end of Palm Beach. Delray here gets amazing waves too. I don't know if you guys knew that. There is an amazing wave. That's not often, but Delray, the main beach there, gets an amazing wave too that breaks. There's a really good sandbar. Yeah, that's me right there. Yeah. That's pretty good. Wait, is there a little? Oh, wait, I messed it up. I thought there was a little pointer to this thing. That was a good one, though. All right, cool. Yeah, that's me. We call this the Cove. That's the name of the surf break there. It's just on the north end of Palm Beach. The Palm Beach jetty right there with the inlet is right there too. All right. Oh, look, I found it. There I am. All right, so here's our weather team now. A couple of new faces and change things that we've had over the years. So of course there I am. I don't know, that was a weird picture, but we have Kate here. Of course, Chief Meteorologist Steve Weagle has been here forever and a day. Jennifer Correa is our new morning weather person, and Steve Villanueva also helps her in the morning. And then brand new is Frances. We're happy to have her. She's come in and she does weekend mornings, and then she does a lot of talks like this, and she does some reporting. And she's actually going to the Olympics because her boyfriend is on the basketball team of the Olympics, the 3-on-3, I think it's called. So super excited. We've been doing stories about it too. So she was going over anyway, so they just roped her in to do some work. So she's going to be there, and that'll be fun to be able to see her. And Todd Wilson will also go to the Olympics, which is really, really cool. So we have a pretty big team here. One of the biggest here in South Florida. But let's move on to the hurricanes here. June 1st. All right, we're in it already. To November 30th is the typical hurricane season. Now, yes, storms can form outside of that time, but this is where most of the storms form, like 95% of storms form. But we had one in January last year. There's been a bunch in May. And they can pretty much occur at any month out in the Atlantic. All right, so last year was pretty active, despite an El Nino. So an El Nino usually means a less active year because there's a lot of shear, but not last year. But if you notice last year, look at the Caribbean. Hardly anything in there, hardly anything in the Gulf except for the one storm that hit us, or Florida, not us here, but Idalia. But everything was out in the Atlantic and a lot in the subtropics too, instead of way down deep in the tropics. So that is due to the shear. That's that's the most affected area, is really the Caribbean and the Gulf. So we had 20 named storms, 7 hurricanes. That's above average. Fourth active. We had one hurricane, Idalia, Cat 3, and that hit Florida's west coast. And that was the only one that made U.S. landfall. We had one Cat 5, Lee. That was way out there. You probably don't remember that one. So the forecast this year, I'm sure you've heard it because, it's been hyped up. This is a year where it's going to be really hyperactive. All of the ingredients are positive for hurricanes, right? So sometimes we have a few positive, we have a few negative. Like last year, the big negative was the El Nino, but there were a lot of other positives that ended up making it a above average season. But pretty much everybody here, NOAA, CSU, AccuWeather, all the ones that predict the long range forecast have way above. So this would go on to, like, we would use up all the names. There's only 21 names in the list. So we would go through the list and then some. And the average is 14 named storms. So we'll be well above that. So what are the factors here that we're talking about, that I was talking about? They're all positive. So number one, and the biggest thing, is the El Nino. Well, that's going away and it's becoming a La Nina. What El Nino did was produce shear, and shear is what tears the storms apart. Doesn't really allow them sometimes to even develop at all or even get that strong. So that's going away. So that's a net positive with the El Nino and the shear relaxing, making for a lot easier development out there. Also, a much warmer than normal tropical Atlantic and Gulf waters. There's record high, really, for the Atlantic right now in water temperatures. It's just way up there. The water is the fuel that fuels these storms, right? Like, you pour kerosene down, doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be a match to spark up that kerosene, but it means that there's a lot of fuel out there for these storms. And then, I don't know why it didn't show up, but there's another one. We're going to have a little bit weaker trade winds, right? So the trade winds kind of what nudges the storms along in the deep tropics, right? In the birthplace. So if you have slower trade winds, that means the storm's going slower. That means it's going to be over those warm waters for longer. So then thus it'll be able to either develop or get stronger here as we go through time. So, and then also the tropical waves that come off Africa, it is expected to have more activity there. So if we have more tropical waves, those are the seeds that come off Africa and over the Cabo Verde Islands and then move across the Atlantic. Those little seeds that are planted eventually develop into tropical depressions and tropical storm, then possibly hurricanes. So if we have more of those, just the odds are we may have more storms. I don't know why that didn't show up on there. All right, so here's our hurricane list. You might remember some of these names because we recycle the list every 6 years. So 6 years ago, we used the same list. However, if we get an extra, destructive storm, that name will get retired. And you could see probably Francine. This is a new name. Anybody's name on here? Anybody got a name on here that you're rooting for? So Francine is new, but Alberto, Beryl, Chris, Debbie, you probably remember those from 6 years ago. I do. And even 6 years before that, too. Ernesto seems familiar, too. Helene does, too. Isaac, Joyce. Kirk seems like it's new. Milton, probably new. And some of these other ones, too. But look, we have 21 names. So what happens? We are forecast to go above 21 names. So what happens if we go above 21 names? Well, we used to use the Greek alphabet. Now we have a supplemental list, the Hurricane Center calls it. And it's just a regular list, just like the last one. This one doesn't cycle every 6 years. This is just the supplemental list. If there's a destructive one on this, it will get retired and then renamed with that too. So they found that the Greek one, we used it twice, and it was way too confusing. Every name sounds the same. Eta, theta, beta, right? Like, so when you're up there and we're trying to say, hey, Eta's here and then beta and theta, I mean, people were just confused. And then also the thing was, well, how do you retire a Greek alphabet and replace it with another? It's the alphabet, right? Like you can't replace it. So very smart that they decided to do away with that because it kind of was a pain, really. All right, so here's some of the factors. We'll just go over it. So I pulled this down. This wasn't that long ago, but the beginning of May, but it's very, very similar. This is the main development region. So like I was saying, the tropical waves come off the coast of Africa and they move over this really warm water. This is like record warm water out here. So a lot of fuel. They're going to be moving somewhat slowly at times. So they're going to have plenty of time to develop and anything. And this is where they look for the beginning of hurricane season to see, well, what's going on. If this is extra warm, that's a positive for hurricane season. Another little thing, too, that the cool water here, because we had an El Nino winter, and remember, it was rainy and windy and crazy. Well, all that moved off the coast, and that's why this is a little bit cooler. But this actually enhances a little bit this, too, because what do we have? Warm water, warm air, that rises. If you have cooler water here, that's sinking motion, so you'll get a little circulation set up here, and that's going to help boost it. Same with the La Nina too, but that'll help boost the storms, and rising motion is what you need for these storms. So that could be a player in it too. Last year, if you remember, all of the Atlantic was warm, so there really wasn't that temperature difference, right? So sometimes you need that temperature difference. You just don't need everything all in one direction. Like tornado season this year, right? It's not because everything was warm. It's because the west was cold, the east was warm. The clash of those things together made an extra active tornado season for Tornado Alley in the Midwest and in the plains. All right, so this is what I was talking about, the rising motion and then the falling. Okay, so let's go to La Nina here. This is what's developing. So this is current. We're not quite there yet. Notice we do have the cooler water off Peru and Ecuador right here. Not quite there, but we're getting there. We're pretty close. Like a well-defined La Nina, it'll be all blue all the way over here. And it's eventually going to get to that too. It's going in that direction. So, and then of course the Atlantic really, really warm, which normally happens too when you have this La Nina over here. This is going to be warmer, and the whole El Nino Southern Oscillation, and so we call it. So that's the whole circulation too. So here you're going to have sinking air, which means you're going to have rising air here too. So that's two parts now that we have the extra push to get these things going. And the El Nino was the warmer water out there. And El Ninos, well, they occur every 2 7 years, maybe on average 5 years. Sometimes they go more, like we had the triple dip one where they were three in a row of El Nino or La Nina. Cooler and wetter winter months. We've seen that this winter. I mean, it was raining constantly. We maybe had like one day of sunshine when normally we see a lot of sunshine. But minimal impact for the summer. However, except for hurricane season, because of that shear that I talked about, that's usually a negative impact on the season. That strong shear kills the development. It's sort of like we talk about the rising motion, right? So if the storms are trying to rise up and they're trying to grow, and then they have something pushing them over, and then they're trying to rise up, and then that shear keeps pushing them. Well, then they won't be able to grow vertically and become a big hurricane. So that's what the shear does. It either shears it apart. It can even push dry air into there. So it's not a good thing for hurricanes. So here's the forecast, the ENSO forecast, and it's really calling for, I mean, pretty much all the models are saying it's going to drop to the La Nina down here. I mean, yeah, the La Nina here. El Nino's up here. That's where we're at. And you can see this too. These are the probability forecasts here. The government likes to use a lot of probability type forecasts instead of like actual numbers. So the probability of a La Nina developing here over the summer months really high. The probability of sticking with El Nino, these red ones, really, really low. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, just the probability is higher. We've had a few where it looked like this and didn't happen at all. But all signs are pointing toward it. And like I just showed you in that water temperature graphic, it's already kind of doing it. All right, so we also have the AMO, we call it, Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillation. Are we going to take notes on this? Is there a test? So basically, this is straight from the NOAA site where there's just a routine to these things, right? Studies found that the multi-decadal oscillation is most prominent link to the active era we're in right now, which started in 1995. So it goes from very active hurricane season to maybe not so active, to very active to not so active. And these are big chunks of time, too. We're talking 20 to 40 years of time of warm and cool phases of the AMO. And that makes the more hurricane season be a little bit more active or a little bit less active. And you can see here through time, you know, we had active in the 1800s. You always hear about the big storms in the 1800s, right? Lots of big ones. Some of those, you know, when they were developing Florida and all that kind of stuff, big storms there. And then a little bit less through the early 1900s. And then the 40s, 50s, 60s, those were really active. We got a ton of hurricanes all the time, even though technology wasn't great. So we really don't know exactly how many formed because we really pretty much know ones that either affected shipping or hit land. A lot of the ones we're naming out there now that are way out there, we probably wouldn't have known about them way back in the day with it before satellites. And then now we've come up. Remember, we had like, I don't know, it was like 12-year drought of a hurricane hitting Florida at all. We had pretty inactive seasons, but now things have definitely changed. All right, a wild card to all this development is the Saharan dust, right? We talk about it, the Saharan dust, sometimes called SAL. But what that is so these tropical waves are moving across Africa. They're kicking up all that Saharan dust, and they kick it up way up into the atmosphere too. That actually rides all the way across the Atlantic, all the way into the Caribbean, and that's what makes that milky, like white look to the sky. And then if you look off in the distance, it's really hazy too. That's from that. Well, that acts like a sponge, right? It's going to absorb all any kind of moisture. So that's a big negative to any storms forming. If a storm tries to form and it gets that dust in it, normally they're either going to be weak or they're not going to form at all. Or it could even be a big storm that's already developed. Some of that dust gets entrained in it and it completely dies out. That's what this stuff does. So it's not good for hurricanes. You can even pick it up on the new GOES satellite. Our new satellites are amazing. They're actually sending another one up this month. They're going to launch another one and we'll have a new GOES East satellite. Sort of like the other one. I probably remember this wasn't that many years ago. It was maybe 5 years ago. But, NOAA and NASA, they like to double up on everything. So one of the old one's going to sit and park out there and they're going to just shut it down. And then they're going to put the new one up there. Then if something happens to the new one, they'll have a backup. So they can just say, okay, well, we're going to switch to the backup. And then it'll provide all the data that we need because it's very important to have it and they don't want to be without it. So this is what it would look like, right? I think this is Puerto Rico. So if you're looking from a mountaintop, this is a clear day, and this is that Saharan dust. So definitely a big detriment there. It also, it's a crazy thing, but the reason why one of the reasons why we have tropical rainforests here in Brazil is because that dust actually it's fertilizer for all that. So it produces minerals and all that kind of stuff falls from the sky and fertilizes the tropics there in Brazil. All right, so here's in June we look close to home. This is where normally the storms where we find them for the time of month. June, July start off really, really slow. Normally, really slow. We don't get a ton of action. Sometimes we get one or two, but all in all, the beginning of the season is pretty slow, and everything forms pretty much close to home. It forms off of maybe old frontal boundaries, big thunderstorm complexes that move off the coast, any kind of thing like that that's locally grown, we call it. Then by the time we get to August and September, notice things stretch back, and then September is pretty much anywhere it can develop here and go. That's our peak is in September. And then we start just getting it closer to home in October. October's still very, very busy. And then not a whole lot in November, but we do occasionally get November storms. So here's the graph on the months here, and you can see the most active time is September. And if you were to pick a peak day, that would be September 10th would be the peak day of hurricane season where you would see the most activity. However, let's say, hey, you get to August, you feeling like, hey, we're past the peak. Here in South Florida, it's a little bit different because our impacts most of the time happen after the peak of hurricane season. So late September, October, and November. What we just had, Nicole was in November, and that hit like Vero, I think. So our impacts happen after. So you can't really let your guard down, even though we passed the peak in September. All right. So the steering currents, why do storms go where they go? That was Irma. You remember Irma? That was the pain in the neck one that had so much debris everywhere because we hadn't got a storm in forever and nobody was cleaning up anything. And then Irma came along, and hurricanes are like cleaners. They just clean all the trees out that haven't been cut or touched. So all of that gets cleaned out. And I remember in my neighborhood, I was actually HOA president then. I had to deal with these humongous, probably as high as this ceiling piles in our neighborhood. And I just had them put it all on the street, like the entrance of the thing, because I don't want it inside the place. And they sat there till Thanksgiving until somebody came pick them up. I was forgotten. Hey, I called every day, trust me. But they were like, we're sending trucks. Sure, you will. All right. So hopefully they fixed that problem, because Irma, that was like for our side of the coast, that was the biggest problem, was debris removal. They had not planned on that at all, and nor did they have trucks or places to put it. All right, so the steering currents all depends on the Bermuda high, right? So that's big high pressure that is semi-stationary out there in the Atlantic, and it sits out there all summer long because we don't really have cold fronts that are sweeping across the entire Atlantic that low in latitude. So the Bermuda high is what's steering you. Think of it like a mountain, like a big bubble, right? The hurricane can't go up into the bubble because it's going up. The hurricane's like a bowling ball. It's going to roll around the base of the high. So if we have a weak Bermuda high, then these are all going to hook around. We've seen those where they just do the good old hurricane hook, and then they stay out in the Atlantic. We call them fish storms because they don't really bother any land. We like those. I like those because they send swell, and I get to go surfing in the summer, which is great. So I want a bunch of those this year, and none of the ones that hit. So a little bit stronger. Those can get steered eastward towards the coastal United States, and then even stronger, they get pushed. When this high is really big and strong, they go straight into the Caribbean, up into the Gulf, or even just into Texas or Mexico, depending on how big and strong the high is. Now, the thing is, the high, it's not going to be the same all season long. It fluctuates almost like it's breathing, right? It's going to be bigger and then weaker and then stronger and then weaker. And it's going to constantly do that through the summer. So really it's all the luck in, is there going to be a storm when it's expanding or contracting, pushing it here into South Florida? All right, so these are the categories here. Of course, category 1, 2. We've had some of these. Francis, that hit Stewart. Was anybody down here for that? That was that was the year 2004 where we had back-to-back hurricanes, and then Wilma came in 05. So it was a very active time then. Nicole, we just had, like I mentioned, that was a category 1. Category 3 was Wilma and Jean. Jean was right behind Francis there. Wilma, of course, came from the Gulf Coast. And Wilma was interesting because everybody said, oh, the backside of the storm was way stronger because Wilma was in a strengthening phase too. It does make a difference whether the storm is in a strengthening phase when it hits landfall or a weakening phase, because it allows, if it's a strengthening phase, it allows that air that's going really fast way up high. The strengthening phase can pull that wind all the way down and make that maximum wind velocity be able to come down to the surface. Where a weakening one, sure, it's strong up there, but it might not come all the way down to the surface. And in category 4 there, we had, well, Ian, Irma, when it hit the Keys was, and then Maria in Puerto Rico, that pretty much wiped out everything over there. The Doppler radar was broken, everything, all the cell phone towers. And then Andrew was a 5 after the fact. That was way back. I was down here for Andrew too. Is anybody down here for Andrew? I know it was a long time ago, but yeah, I was going to college. You missed the first week of college because we had a hurricane down here. And then Dorian, of course, you remember Dorian. Dorian was supposed to come here. There was a day where Weagle and I, we walked in, we looked at the models, and we're just like, oh my gosh. It was supposed to sit like right over like West Palm with the eye wall, like right up Jupiter Inlet. And we were just like, this is going to be bad. And then the next day, it just all changed. So that's just something that we learn too as meteorologists. Sure, you can trust the model. Sure, you like model consistency of every one of them saying the same thing, but you have to see the consistency in time too, right? So you have to see it. Okay, it did it this day. It did it the next day. Did it the next day? Okay, then it may be on to something. But if it's a fluctuation, the models always have crazy fluctuations that we learn to deal with there. All right, there was Irma there. This was Dorian. This was huge, 185 mile per hour winds. And remember, it stalled over the Bahamas too for a little while. And like I said, that model run had us stalling over us for the same amount of time. It was crazy. So Marsh Harbor there and Abaco just absolutely destroyed there. They're still repairing it though. I mean, but as you can see, I mean, there's a lot of wood. A lot of our stuff isn't built like that anymore either. So the first thing to help us with the building codes was Andrew. Andrew came through and it was kind of an eye opener, right? Like they were like, we cannot build houses like this anymore because it wiped out so many houses, ripped the roofs off. Once the roof is gone, the house is gone, right? Once wind gets inside the place, that's where it's bad. So, that old thing where they say, oh, crack the window or something. No. You want to keep it as airtight as possible. You don't want any wind or air getting in there because if the air gets in, it's going to go up and your roof is like an umbrella. So it's going to just push the roof off. And once the roof is gone, the whole place is gone. So you want to keep it as tight as possible. And of course, stay in interior room away from windows. Oh yeah, Harvey was like very wet. So this just shows that you don't really need wind for a disaster. This one just sat there and rained and rained and rained over the Texas area. And then there's Andrew. And there it was. That's the best our satellites were back then, which is kind of crazy to think. But yeah, that came in and that dropped south. That was heading right for Palm Beach County. And that high, like I was telling you, it strengthened a little bit. And that dropped it a little bit south as it came through, which I know terrible scenario down there, but there were much more people farther north. So it was kind of good in a way, but obviously not for these people. This is what it looked like. And notice this is, see the houses, like you don't see any concrete block. And now that's all we have. They don't even allow you the other way. So it's all concrete block. Those will stay up. Of course, the roofs again have straps now because that's the code. And then we got another set of codes after I think it was after Gene and Wilma and all those. We got another set of codes that strengthened it even more. So if something is built recently, like it's pretty strong. This was the big Labor Day storm. This is the one where they were building the Flagler Railroad, and it knocked the train off the carts, and the workers were in there, and it killed a lot of people. Camille was one of the strongest ones to record until recently. And this is the apartment building on the Gulf Coast, the Richie Lou Apartments here, and that's what it'll look like afterwards. That's just this is solely storm surge, right? This isn't wind. This was storm surge in the Gulf Coast. On the Gulf Coast, even in the Panhandle on the West Coast, it gets amplified because it's really shallow. That water comes up, it has nowhere to go. So, and it's like a concave coastline, and that funnels water in, and that's what happened there. And I just learned too, Weevil and I just did a talk at Port St. Lucie. He went back to the same spot, like, I don't know, 20 years ago, maybe. And there was a Winn-Dixie here, right? So they built I need to get that slide from him because it's really interesting. So there was a Winn-Dixie right here. He took a picture with a Winn-Dixie. Then Michael came, wiped that out. There's something about this area that just does not allow building. So that entire plaza, it was Winn-Dixie and some other shops and all that, got completely wiped out. Now it's a park. They just decided we're not going to build there anymore. And it's just a park. There's trees and grass and what it is now. So very smart. Yeah. You learn a couple lessons that, that's probably not the best place. All right. So we don't necessarily need a hurricane to get destruction. Tropical storms do too, because tropical storms can produce tornadoes. This was Faye and Wellington produced a tornado. Of course, flooding too. Tropical storm Isaac. I don't know if you guys remember that. It was more a little bit to the north, but it dumped like 24 inches of rain. I know Breakers West out past where I live, people were trapped in there because the water was so high. So it was a little bit crazy with the rainfall and the water. Of course, storms contain a lot of water, and it could lead to some flooding. And remember, you don't drive when you see flooded streets. A lot of thing down here, we don't really have the water that's gonna like pull your car away and rush you out, like if there's mountains and stuff. But what we have is a lot of canals. And what do canals look like when they're flooded, or what do streets look like when they're flooded? Canals. So you think you're turning on a street and it's actually a canal, and then bloop, you go right in there because the canals are straight as the streets are. And it's really hard to determine when everything's covered with water, what's a street and what's a canal. So it's better off, not that you're going to get swept away, but you might fall into the canal. All right. So the strongest part of the storm is the front right portion of the storm, of the direction it's heading. So if the storm is heading here, this will be the strongest. So if you're in this area, you're going to experience the maximum amount that the hurricane has to offer. If you're down here, this is less, just because of the counterclockwise flow of the hurricane. This will be the strongest part. It'll have the most wind. It'll have the most storm surge. Back here, we'll probably have the most tornadoes. There'll be a lot of tornadoes kind of coming off bands through here too. And then also way out ahead of it, we'll have a bunch too. So just think about it like they're heading towards us this way. It's going to be the northern end of the storm, of the usual track if a storm is coming from the east to us. All right, just real quick about the watch and warnings, right? To distinguish between the two. A watch just means watch out. It's going to be a wider area affected, right? The hurricane watch is going to be a bigger area. You're going to have a little bit more time, 48 hours. And the Hurricane Center says that in a hurricane watch, that's when you put shutters up, right? Right when they say, okay, we're under a hurricane watch, that's when you're supposed to put shutters up. Now, if you know what you're doing and you've done it before and you know how long it takes to do it, like I wait for the hurricane warning because I know I can get it done in like a half a day. And, but if you have to hire somebody or you can't do it yourself, I mean, the watch is when you should be doing that. And the warning is going to be a more confined space, right? They're going to narrow it down a little bit more. So the warning, you're pretty much a better bet to get hurricane force winds or even gusts. Where a watch, you could get a watch and then not experience a hurricane because maybe it moved or the area shifted a little bit. And that's 36 hours ahead of time when you get the warning. The warning. All right, so this is something too, because I know everybody likes to watch, national news and because they have the most resources, but hurricanes are local. So you really should be paying attention to your local people. Even if it's not me, I don't care. I want to keep you guys safe. Watch whoever, but watch the local stations. Don't pay attention to Fox or CNN or MSNBC because they're out here just to make it look crazy, right? Like we see it all the time, right? They're out, oh, it's crazy and we can't, and about while we're telling you, well, actually, I don't know where they are. I mean, that doesn't look like that here, because they're going to look for the worst stuff. They're going to hype it up. The Weather Channel is crazy like that too, right? The Weather Channel, obviously, that's their business. They want to find the worst stuff to show everybody. But which is fine when it's not affecting you, but when it's affecting you, probably should listen to the local people, your local emergency managers, your local officials, and your local meteorologists. And hopefully that's me. All right. All right, you should always have a plan. You can go through your plan. Your little booklet's great here too, because each individual person is a little bit different, right? Like somebody needs medication, somebody has pets, somebody has something else. So you're all going to have a different plan. But the point is to have the plan already in place before the storm is hitting, because when you don't, that's when you get nervous and scared and do erratic things. But if you have your plan, you go over it before hurricane season starts, you get some supplies early, right? You can get water and pile it up. You can get some canned goods and pile it up. You can get batteries at a time. In fact, we have the tax-free holidays right now. I think it's right now. It's at least for another week or so. Pile it up now. That way, if something threatens, you can just make fun of the people going to the store and standing in lines and in traffic and all that because you already got your stuff. So I like to do that too, especially when water is concerned, because people go crazy with water. That you just pile it up now, and that's one less thing you have to worry about. Now, some things you can't, like gas. I realize gas situation is getting crazy now. With a week out, people are buying out all the gas. There's nothing you can do about that because you're still going to need gas in a week. So you just got to deal with lines of gas, or just, I guess, don't go far and you'll be able to have it. And always if you have pets, pre-plan where your pets are going to go and what they're going to do, because not every place takes pets and there's policies, and sometimes you have to pre-register. So there's definitely a lot of extra things you have to do if you have a pet. You guys out here, though, this place is pretty strong. I don't think evacuation is in your order. And they actually say too, you want to run from water, which is the storm surge, but hide from wind. You don't necessarily need to evacuate just because of the wind if you're in a strong place, right? Because then you're just clogging the road for everybody who needs to run, like people in mobile homes, people right along the coast, people in those evacuation zones, low-lying areas, weaker structures. You're just clogging the roads, and it's not good to be on the road anyways, because what if you get stuck? Then what happens? That kind of happened with Irma. Everybody fled to the West Coast. Then Irma went to the West Coast. Everybody fled to Orlando, and then it went to Orlando. So you're better off just staying put. Have your plan to stay put here. Another thing, never be alone. It's always good to have, don't ride out a storm alone. Find somebody. Anything can happen in a storm, and you're going to need somebody to either call for help or, whatever. So it's always good to have a friend or a relative, a loved one with you. And these are just some of the things, water, food, all that kind of stuff. And your prescriptions, obviously, you're going to need that. Things that you think, if there's no power, and what are the type of things that aren't going to work anymore? I think we're going to have like a tough time, like with cell phones, because if we do get a big hurricane, cell phones aren't going to work. And it's not because your battery's dead. I mean, you can always charge it in the car and that kind of stuff. And remember, don't do it in the garage. That's something I wanted to add to this too. Like, I can see people in the future, like, oh, I got to charge my phone. So they start the car in the garage, put the phone in the car, and then obviously the carbon monoxide situation not good because we're not used to that. Like we don't even pay attention to that kind of thing because we never run the car in the garage. But it's the cell phone towers, just like what happened in Puerto Rico. When it knocks down the towers, you're just not going to have any communication. So you're not going to be able to get anything. Now, I go to the hurricane conferences every year. They are going to have mobile centers that set up for Wi-Fi, charging, all that kind of stuff. That's what emergency managers do. So we will have places like that you will be able to go and plug in. But I just think on a general basis, you're probably not going to have that right away. Eventually, I mean, they'll fix it quick, but eventually, you know, you'll get it. But there's our weathermobile. Anybody on Instagram, on the gram here, follow me at Serving Weatherman. And I post everything there too for any kind of updates or explainers and that kind of stuff. Oh, yeah, the old school weather radio too. I still have 2 of these. I have this exact one. It's a little crank, so you don't need a battery. You just and you crank it up. You know, a lot of people don't have radios anymore, but I'm telling you, when your cell phone's not working, you're going to be like, well, what do I use? And the radio is always going to be there. We still have backup plans, transmit on the radio stations, and they're still going to be on there. You're still going to be able to get information, even though we're not using it now. In emergency situations, we're going to have that radio. So that's good to have. And of course, your phone, download our apps too. They're going to always keep you up to date. You get the push alerts from them too to help keep you up to date instantly for everything too. All right. Thank you guys for watching. Did I take too much time? Usually this is long. No, there's about an hour. Okay, good. Is there any questions? I mean, I'll take questions. We have a couple minutes. I can take some questions. Go ahead. Yeah, and a lot of people think that too. We were just at the governor's hurricane conference that was in West Palm a couple weeks ago, and the head of emergency management of the entire state, he kept focusing on, listen, everybody can't evacuate. Our roads, we can't do it. We're peninsula. It can come from any direction. You're going to be affected. His point too was, if you're going to evacuate, you evacuate tens of miles, not hundreds of miles, right? So if you're going to evacuate, if you're in a weak structure, you don't want to go to Orlando to go to their, evacuation shelters. You want to go close by to your own one in your own county, the closest one to you. He doesn't want people driving all over creation because, again, it's going to clog the road. So know where your shelters are if you can't stay wherever you're staying and you need to go to a shelter. You just got to stay closer to home. He says you need to use the resources of each county that we're in because that's what they prepare for. That's where all the money's going, is to each county to prepare, and then for the aftermath of the storms too. So again, the evacuation, if it's unnecessary, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't just run to run, because most of the buildings are going to be fine, especially nowadays. Things that are built good are fine. And like this place looks like a bunker. Like, I don't think this place is going anywhere. So, and you're going to have people around that can help you too. That's another thing. If you go out and you're on your own, who knows what happens? And people can get trapped on the road too. But if you really, really want to go early, go before everybody. Like if you're really just, listen, I'm uncomfortable, I don't want to be here, I'm out. Well, then go early. Go early, get out of the way, get to where you're going first, get settled, and, let everybody else then evacuate whenever they're supposed to evacuate, which is like 72 hours before. Thank you. I will. Hey, you know what? Hold on. We're gonna do a selfie right now. I'll do a selfie and I'll put it on at 7:00 tonight. How about that? You guys gonna watch at 7? Okay, hold on. At 11 or 7? I'll take my glasses off. We'll do a big selfie. This would be great. So I'll post that and I'll put it on the air for you guys. I'll say what's up to my Glen Eagles peeps for the hurricane talk I had today. Thank you guys so much for coming out. I do appreciate you supporting this and coming and listening to me. Yeah, go ahead. I'm good. I'm good. Weagle's back there. He'll be fine. Yeah, it is. And you know what's funny too? Like we used to say that a lot. It's just hard to say it now because of the way homes are built. Open floor plan. There is no windowless room. Like I remember when I first started, I would say, "Oh yeah, go into a bathroom." I don't think I've ever lived in a house that doesn't have a window in the bathroom, right? Like they all have it. So a closet is usually. I know my parents when Wilma came through. It pretty much they lived in Boynton Beach at the time, and it was tearing apart their whole porch. You know the bird cage thing that people get on the back was just getting ripped off, and they went into the closet too because it's the closet in the middle. And don't forget, you have more walls and studs all around you. So the closet is a really good place. And if you don't have like a cluttered closet, it's a good idea to keep some of your hurricane stuff in there. You know what I mean? You because what's going to happen is you're not going to hang out in there the whole time. You're probably just going to be sitting and watching TV or listening to the radio or whatever, and then things are going to get crazy, and you're going to be like, I need to go in my safe place, and then you're going to go in there. You don't want to have to worry about, okay, now I got to drag my medication in there. Now I got to take some pillows. Now I got to take, maybe keep a little kit in there so you don't have to worry about extra battery for your phone, a phone charger, like a Mophie or something like that kind of stuff you can keep in there already. That way you don't have to think about it. You're like, okay, I know my spot. My safe place has all this stuff, and I can go right in there. Go ahead. Okay, good. I'm glad you brought that up because there is some kind of misconception when you get the impact windows in glass that they are like indestructible. They are not. They will break. The thing is with them and why they're safe is they won't break in, right? Like you're not gonna have a coconut fly through the window and like kill you. You're not gonna have a 2x4 fly through the window and hurt your family. It will stop that, but they will break. So I just got impact windows a few years ago. I kept my shutters because to deal with insurance, especially now, to deal with the insurance companies after. I mean, think about it. If we get hit by a big storm, half your windows are broken. That you have to deal with the insurance company for that, and you know that they don't act that fast. So you're gonna have broken windows for like months. So I think for me, what I did, I kept the shutters. They're just in the garage, anyways. And if there's a category 4 or 5, or even like a major hurricane, 3, 4, or 5, I'm just gonna put them up. Because I just don't want to deal with the aftermath and the insurance and all that. Of course, if it's like a Cat 5, the roof is you're always going to deal with some kind of insurance, but I feel it's better to minimize that and be able to still live in your house rather than have a bunch of broken windows and, that kind of stuff. So I'm glad you asked that. Go ahead. Yeah. So they will stay. The thing is, landlines now they call it voice over IP, like, so they also rely on the internet now, which kind of stinks but they're supposed to be more fiber optic and more, underground and that kind of stuff. So they should still work. But remember too, like your internet. So if you don't have power, obviously your router's not going to work. You're not going to get Wi-Fi, right? So that part of your phone's not going to work either, along with the cell phone signal. Also, we don't know yet because we haven't really had it happen. Like a lot of, if you have Xfinity or whatever, like Comcast, like a lot of their cable lines are still up on telephone poles. So if those go down, even if you have a generator and backup, the internet still might not work and the Wi-Fi might not work because if that stuff down in your neighborhood, then you're not going to get it either. Yeah. Yeah, they are not that expensive anymore. I did a couple stories. It was even a while ago, so I bet they're cheaper now. But the guy came to one of the hurricane shows, and he was, selling to emergency managers, that kind of stuff. And the individual one, like I don't know, it was $300, 400. It really wasn't that much money. I mean, you got to get the service, obviously, which costs money, but the actual phone wasn't that much money. Also, Starlink too. I don't know if you guys are tech savvy, but Starlink will work no matter what. So Starlink is what SpaceX keeps sending up the satellites. So that's operational now. We actually have 2 or 3 of them at the station, and we use them all the time. They work amazing. So it's like a little square thing. It's not like a dish. It's just like a square thing that sits on the ground, and you can get everything like super fast. Everything works on that. That would be a good disaster thing to have, except, it's kind of expensive to pay for monthly. Right. I know it's awful. I know. And Andrew was like that. I have like a window unit. So I have a little generator. I don't have like a whole house generator. I just have like the portable one. So if you get like a window unit AC, you can get them at like, I mean, I think Costco has them a couple $100. Home Depot has a couple $100. You figure you're not going to use like your whole house the whole time. So I have one that I'm just going to put in the bedroom, and then that part of the house will be air conditioned. The rest won't, but you'll at least be able to sleep in peace, because I know that's the hardest, is sleeping when it's so hot. Well, the generator is expensive. So if you have a portable generator, it's I don't know, you could 6, 7, $800. Well, but you have to have it enough juice for it to power the window unit, right? So you whatever window unit you look and see how much it pulls, and then make sure that the thing does that. But I think the 6900 whatever, like that should power small window units. Now, not humongous ones, but small ones, enough to at least cool it down a little bit for you. Yeah. Well, no, like the gas ones I'm talking about. Like with the wheels, it's like a big thing. I mean, it can run. So on that, it can run refrigerator. It can run that, window AC unit and some lights. That's about it. Cool. More questions? Okay. So probably your guys' lakes are controlled. Like they'll be able to move the water places so it doesn't get into homes, because I'm sure this was all designed for that. I know my lake, it has a little weir, and somebody's supposed to, I was actually in charge of that when I was doing it, but not anymore. But I could open it and it will lower the lake level. Like, so I'm sure they have all that here. Everything is intertwined. Probably all your lakes are piped together and all that when this place was built, and they'll be able to adjust. So yeah. So you won't like, it's never going to come up into the houses, but you still should have flood insurance, because flood insurance counts for even like rain coming down, right? Need a what? Well, if debris is coming into, they say drag a mattress, but I mean, that's way too big. But I would say pillows. So if the house is falling apart, you don't want like shrapnel hitting you. You can, buffer yourself. You got to think of worst case scenarios, right? You plan for the worst, but hope for the best, right? I always think it's funny when when a storm is supposed to come, and we're all like, okay, you need to prepare for all this. And then people get mad when it doesn't hit. It's like, well, this is what we're supposed to do. You're planning for the worst case scenario. And when it doesn't happen, you should be happy that, okay, I went over my plan and it's good. You're welcome. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you guys coming and listening to me. Thank you guys. You have a beautiful place here, by the way. This place is amazing. Very nice. Mhm.
the condo buildings are 6 or 8